On our 45th anniversary, my husband introduced his new wife. My daughter hugged her and laughed at my pain. I didn't argue. I walked out, leaving a sealed envelope behind. 30 minutes later, they opened it. What was inside destroyed everything. They say a woman knows when something in her life has changed, even before the truth reaches her ears. I used to think that was just a saying meant to comfort us in hard times. But now I know it's true. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 68 years old, and I never thought I'd start my story at the end of my marriage. But here I am, sitting in a quiet apartment in downtown Seattle, far away from the house I spent over 4 decades building, telling you the story of how everything fell apart, and how I finally began living. I met Frank when I was 21. He was a fresh-faced professor, just starting out at the University of Washington. I worked at the campus library then, cataloging books, organizing dusty archives, and dreaming about a life that might someday feel as big as the world itself. Frank used to come in nearly every day, always pretending he couldn't find the psychology section. He didn't need help, he just wanted to talk. I thought he was charming, polite, smart, safe. We fell into a rhythm. Dinners after work, walks around Green Lake, quiet evenings filled with books and jazz. After 2 years, we got married at the courthouse. Frank said we couldn't afford a real wedding at the time. He had student loans, I was supporting my little brother, and I believed him. I didn't need the dress or the flowers. I just wanted a life with him. That was the first promise he broke, though I didn't realize it then. Someday, he'd say every time I brought it up. When things settle down. When we're in a better place. Someday never came. We had one daughter, Lily. She was everything to me, bright, bold, full of life. I left my job at the library to stay home with her, convinced that supporting Frank's career and raising Lily well would be enough to make a happy life. I don't regret raising Lily, not for a second. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder what I gave up to keep everything afloat. Frank's career flourished. He became head of his department, published papers, gave lectures in cities I'd only seen in movies. He traveled often. I stayed home, paying the bills, painting the kitchen, raising our daughter, and telling myself this was love. The cracks were small at first. Little moments of silence when I tried to talk to him about anything personal. His eyes drifting toward his phone during dinner. The way he lit up when Celeste Dawson's name came up at faculty events. Celeste had been a theater teacher at a nearby school. They'd known each other long before I came into the picture. I thought nothing of it, at first. On our 45th wedding anniversary, I expected nothing. Maybe dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant, if I was lucky. We hadn't celebrated an anniversary properly in years, so I didn't think much of it when Frank said he had plans that day and would be home late. But that evening, I received a message from a neighbor. She sent me a picture. Frank, in a tuxedo, standing in front of a decorated gazebo. And next to him, Celeste, in a white lace gown, holding a bouquet, smiling like she was the queen of the world. In the crowd, Lily, my daughter, clapping, cheering, like this was the happiest day of her life. I couldn't breathe. I thought maybe it was a staged photo, a joke, some sort of faculty skit. But when Frank came home later that night, still wearing his tuxedo, a smudge of lipstick on his collar, it wasn't a joke. Evelyn, he said as he walked in, I didn't want you to find out like this. Like this? Like this? I sat on the couch staring at him. My mouth refused to form words. He went on, as though he were explaining something trivial. Celeste's not well. She's been diagnosed with Parkinson's. It's early stage, but she wanted one last celebration, something to hold on to. I couldn't say no. A wedding. I finally croaked. Frank sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. It was symbolic. A gesture. You know we haven't been happy for years. I whispered. Then came the worst part. Lily walked in, carrying leftover cake and smiling. Mom, please don't be upset. It wasn't personal. You've always been so emotional about things. This was about closure, for Dad and Celeste. You should try to be happy for them. Happy? That night, I packed my bags. Quietly. Deliberately. I opened the drawer in our study and pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared months ago, but never had the courage to serve. Until now. I left the house without a single glance back. My hands trembled as I signed the lease on a modest one-bedroom apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. And for the first time in 45 years, I slept without waiting for someone to come home. No lectures, no responsibilities, no pretending. At first, it was strange. The silence. The lack of schedules. I didn't know what to do with my time. I wandered aimlessly through Pike Place Market, sipped coffee alone at the cafe on 3rd and Pine, listened to the rain tapping against the window and wondered if I'd made a mistake. Then, one morning, I passed a community board in the lobby of my building. A flyer was pinned there, bright blue with yellow borders. Silver Lens, travel and photography for women over 60. Explore. Heal. Discover yourself. Something about those words pulled at me. I dialed the number. A woman named June answered, her voice warm and kind. We're heading to Japan next month to see the cherry blossoms. If you're looking for a fresh start, Evelyn, this could be it. A fresh start. At 68. I said yes. And that's when everything began to change. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have guessed, was that the peace I had found wouldn't last long. That betrayal can echo louder than expected. That Frank and Celeste weren't done trying to rewrite my story. And neither was Lily. But I would never let them define me again. Not after what I'd already survived. Not after I found the courage to walk away. Because this time, I wasn't just leaving behind a broken marriage. I was walking toward myself. Japan was the first place I went after leaving Frank. I had never traveled outside the country before. Not because I didn't want to, but because life just never allowed it. Between Frank's schedule, Lily's needs, and a house that constantly demanded my attention, my dreams had always taken the back seat. But now I was sitting on a plane, headed for Tokyo, my heart pounding in both fear and excitement. The Silver Lens group was made up of about 12 women, all over 60, all different shades of heartbreak and strength. Some were divorced, some widowed, a few had never married. But every single one of them carried a story, and as we got to know each other, I began to realize I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only woman who had loved too deeply, given too much, and received far too little in return. We wandered through gardens painted pink and white by cherry blossoms. We ate sushi that melted in our mouths and drank tea in tiny, quiet rooms. One night, under a glowing lantern in Kyoto, I told my story to the group. I didn't cry, not then. I just spoke, and they really listened without pity or judgment. That night, I slept better than I had in years. But peace has a way of being temporary. Back in Seattle, something else had started to unfold, something I didn't know about until I returned. While I had been rediscovering myself among ancient temples and quiet rivers, my name had been dragged through the mud. It began with a blog. An old coworker of mine, Judith, from my library days, had written a personal essay that was published in a local lifestyle column. I hadn't seen Judith in years, but somehow she had the nerve to paint me as a bitter, neglectful woman who abandoned her family after decades of comfort. She didn't mention my name directly, but it was clear enough. She even referred to my college professor husband and grown daughter who had to take over the emotional weight of the household. It was full of fiction. No one reached out to me for my side of the story. I read the post twice, then a third time. My hands were shaking. What hurt wasn't just the lies. It was the betrayal. I had spent my life helping everyone, Judith included. I once drove her to the emergency room when she fainted at work. I loaned her books, baked her banana bread when her mother died, and now she was casually turning my life into a villain's tale. People shared the blog, commented. It was picked up by a few social media groups. It didn't go viral like a celebrity scandal, but it was enough to sting. Neighbors I hadn't heard from in months stopped waving. The barista at the coffee shop stopped making small talk. I became a whisper behind closed doors. And as if that wasn't enough, Ethan, my son-in-law Lily's husband, posted a photo that crushed me in ways I didn't think possible. It was a picture of him, Lily, Frank, and Celeste all dressed up and smiling. It looked like it had been taken during some family dinner. Behind them was a chalkboard that read, "Home is where love lives." The caption underneath? "True love always wins." I stared at it for a long time. Maya, my granddaughter, had once been so close to me. We baked cookies together. I helped her with school projects, read to her when she was sick. But now her eyes in that photo looked distant. She wasn't hugging me anymore. She was standing beside Celeste. I wanted to believe it was Lily's influence. I wanted to believe Maya was too young to understand what was happening. But the truth was, the more silence I gave them, the more they rewrote the story without me. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. What could I say? I didn't want to argue online. That was never my style. Instead, I packed my bags again. Morocco was next. The colors, the markets, the call to prayer echoing through the city at dawn. It was like stepping into another world. I rode a camel through the Sahara, laughed until my sides hurt with a woman named Joyce from Chicago, and watched the stars blink awake in the blackest sky I had ever seen. And there, under that vast night sky, I remembered something. I had never seen stars like this with Frank. Not once in 45 years. Our vacations had been rushed, functional, more about his schedule than my joy. Even when we went to California once, it was because he had a conference. In Morocco, I wasn't just seeing the world, I was being seen. The other women in my group looked at me as someone real. Someone worth knowing. That meant more to me than I could ever say. But the world I had left behind was still trying to chase me. I came home to more whispers. At the grocery store. In my building. Judith's blog had gotten attention because Celeste had shared it on her Facebook page, calling it an honest account of a family healing from abandonment. She had written a comment under the post too. Some women choose bitterness over love. I thank God every day for the second chance he gave me, with a man who never stopped loving me. My stomach turned. They weren't just rewriting the story. They were erasing me from it entirely. I wanted to scream. But instead I put on my coat and walked to the waterfront. I sat there, watching the ferries glide across the Sound, and asked myself a hard question. Did I need the world to believe me? Or did I just need to believe in myself? I didn't have an answer yet. But I was getting closer. One afternoon, after a photography class with my silver lens friends, I received a message from an old neighbor. She had seen Frank and Celeste recently. "Things aren't going so smoothly," she said. "You didn't hear this from me, but the fire department showed up at their house last week. Something about an iron left face down on a rug. Whole place smelled like smoke for hours." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because I wanted anyone hurt, but because it was the first time I realized that no matter how pretty they made their love story look, it couldn't last on lies. Frank had traded me for fantasy. And fantasy doesn't know how to make a home, clean a stain, or calm a child in the middle of the night. Later that week, my granddaughter Maya texted me for the first time in months. It was short. "Hey, just wanted to say hi. I miss you." I didn't know what to make of it, but it made my heart flutter all the same. Maybe the truth had a way of finding its way through the cracks. I wasn't sure yet, but something was coming, and this time I would be ready. I never thought I'd find myself standing in the middle of Iceland, the wind whipping through my coat, staring at a glacier like it held answers. But that's exactly where I was a few weeks after Maya sent that message. I hadn't replied yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. What did you say to a granddaughter who once called you her hero, only to watch her slowly drift away? The trip to Iceland was cold, harsh, and breathtaking. Much like life, I thought. Unforgiving in places, but still beautiful if you looked close enough. We stayed in a lodge tucked away from the city lights, surrounded by snow and silence. At night, the northern lights painted the sky green and gold, and the women in my group, the Golden Circle as we'd started calling ourselves, huddled together around fires sharing stories of the past, some filled with love, others with regret. All of them brave. One night, I opened up again. I told them about the fire incident. How Celeste had apparently burned a rug by leaving an iron face down, triggering smoke alarms and bringing the entire neighborhood out to watch. I told them about the blog post, the family photo, the cruel caption. True love always wins. I even told them about Maya's text. They didn't judge. They just listened. June, a woman from Boston with sharp eyes and a softer heart, leaned toward me and said, "Evelyn, you don't need to fix them. You need to finish healing yourself." I nodded, even though part of me still felt tethered to the past like some invisible string refused to let go. It was only after we got back from Iceland that everything began to shift. I had been home in Seattle for less than a week when I decided to walk through my old neighborhood. Not because I missed it, but because I needed to see it one last time. Closure. I wasn't trying to spy, but as I passed by my old house, I noticed something strange. Frank was outside, pacing back and forth, clearly arguing with someone on the phone. I shouldn't have stopped. But I did. And I caught just enough. "No, Celeste, I told you, this isn't what I signed up for. You promised you'd take care of things while I recovered. You said you could handle it." He looked thin, worn down, tired, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, like he belonged to another lifetime, like I had finally stepped out of the storm, and he was still caught in the rain. I walked away. Later that night, Maya called me. Her voice was soft, nervous. "Grandma? I know it's been a while. I wanted to talk to you." "About what, sweetheart?" She hesitated. "About everything. About Mom. About Grandpa. About Celeste." I waited. "I don't like her," she said finally. "She doesn't talk to me. She yells at Dad. She burned my math project last week, because she turned the oven on with it still on the counter. I blinked. She what? She blamed me. Said I was careless. Mom just stood there. Grandpa looked like he didn't even know what to say. My heart cracked, but I kept my voice calm. Maya, I'm sorry. That's not your fault. I know. But it feels like no one else sees it. I see it. She sniffled. I miss you. I miss how things used to be. I miss you too. It was a short call, but it meant everything. It reminded me that no matter how far apart we'd become, blood still remembered love. But of course, peace never lasted long in that house. The next week, I got a call from Sophia, a friend of mine who still lived a few houses down from where Frank and I used to stay. She sounded both amused and slightly horrified. You will not believe what just happened, Evelyn. What now? I sighed. Celeste, she had some man with her. Loud, dramatic, looked like someone out of a soap opera. They were arguing in the driveway. He was waving papers around, yelling about money she owed him. I blinked. Money. Apparently she took out a private loan in Frank's name. Never told him. The guy's threatening to sue. I rubbed my temples. Of course she did. They were shouting so loud, the neighbors called the cops. Frank tried to calm things down but ended up tripping over the curb. What? He twisted his ankle, I think. Nothing too serious, but the paramedics came anyway. It was a scene, Evelyn. A whole scene. I thanked her and hung up, letting the information settle. This wasn't just a broken relationship. It was a disaster slowly unraveling in public. And part of me, an old, petty part, felt vindicated. But another part, the deeper part, just felt tired. I had spent 45 years trying to hold that man's life together, and now the person he left me for was tearing it apart piece by piece. The next day, I went to the community center for a dance class with the Golden Circle. That's where I met Martin. He had joined the class late, invited by his sister, who thought he needed to get out of the house. His smile was warm, and his steps a little clumsy, but there was something calming about him. We danced once, then again, and by the third class, we were laughing in between spins like we'd known each other for years. After one lesson, he walked me to my car. You have a great rhythm, he said. I was a librarian for 30 years, I chuckled. Dancing isn't exactly my specialty. Well, it suits you, he said. Freedom looks good on you. I didn't know what to say to that. But I smiled, and for the first time in a long while it wasn't forced. Frank, meanwhile, was falling apart. I heard through the grapevine that Celeste had moved out temporarily, claiming she needed space to reconnect with her spiritual self. Translation: she was trying to run from the mess she had made. Frank was left to deal with unpaid bills, angry loan collectors, and a daughter who was now finally questioning the fantasy she had once believed in. Lily still hadn't called me. Not once. But Maya had. She texted more often now. Sent photos of her paintings. Asked for book recommendations. We were slowly finding our way back to each other. And just when I thought maybe things had quieted, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Frank. It wasn't long. Just 2 pages. But it was full of regret. He didn't ask to come back. He didn't beg. But he did say something I hadn't expected. I thought Celeste would fill a hole in my life, he wrote. But the truth is, she only reminded me of what I lost. You didn't just hold our family together, Evelyn. You were our family. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I folded it and slid it into a drawer. I wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. Because I was finally beginning to understand something I had missed for most of my life. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or cruel. Sometimes it's just quietly thriving while others fall apart. By the time summer rolled around, Seattle had started to bloom again. I could see it from my apartment window. The cherry trees lining the sidewalks, couples walking hand in hand with iced coffees, kids riding bikes. It was the kind of season that made you feel like something new was always just around the corner. And in many ways it was. Martin and I started spending more time together. At first it was casual, coffee after dance class, weekend walks through the sculpture park. He was thoughtful, never pushing, never assuming. He asked questions like he genuinely wanted to know the answers. He listened when I talked, even if I rambled about things like the book I was reading or the bread recipe I had finally perfected. It had been a long time since someone made me feel heard without needing anything in return. One Sunday afternoon, we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the sun dip low behind the water. Martin handed me a cup of chamomile tea, his hands steady and warm. "Did you ever think," he said quietly, "that the second half of life might be the better half?" I looked over at him, surprised. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged. "The first half is about everyone else. Raising kids, chasing careers, making ends meet. But this is the part where we finally get to choose ourselves. I smiled, sipping my tea. I like that. But even as I was beginning to feel the edges of happiness return, the storm from my old life wasn't done with me yet. Celeste came back. Not into my life directly, but into the headlines. One of the women from my travel group, Ruth, texted me a link to a local news article. Apparently, Celeste had been involved in a minor scandal. The man she'd borrowed money from, the same one who showed up screaming in Frank's driveway, turned out to be a small-time investor who ran a series of shady loan operations. Celeste had promised him repayment with money she didn't have, using Frank's name to sign off on something she claimed was for home renovations. When Frank found out, he went straight to the bank to freeze any accounts tied to her. That move led to a shouting match in a grocery store parking lot. Someone filmed it. The video didn't go viral in the traditional sense, but it made its way into a neighborhood watch group online. From there, the story snowballed. Local gossip sites picked it up, and within days, Celeste was the talk of town. For once, it wasn't me in the spotlight. It was surreal watching it unfold. There she was, the woman who had been presented as some graceful, tragic figure, now screaming at a man half her age in front of the produce section. In the video, Frank was standing there, limp and defeated, barely able to speak over the chaos. And then Maya called again. "Grandma, did you see the video?" I let out a soft laugh. "I did. She's awful." She told Grandpa it was all his fault. That if he had just given her what she needed, none of this would have happened. I sighed. Some people always need someone to blame. "I'm sorry, Grandma," Maya whispered. "I'm sorry I believed any of it. I was stupid." "No," I said quickly. "You were just trying to trust your family. That's never stupid." We didn't talk long, but when we hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe it was forgiveness. Maybe it was just relief. But whatever it was, it felt right. That night, I was getting ready for bed when someone buzzed my apartment. I checked the screen. It was Lily. My heart skipped. I hadn't seen her in almost a year. Not since that night I left the house with my suitcase, silent and cold. Part of me wanted to ignore the buzzer, pretend I wasn't home. But something told me not to. When I opened the door, Lily looked tired. Her makeup was minimal, her eyes puffy. She held a paper bag. "I brought lemon bars," she said. I blinked. "Lemon bars? You used to make them when I had a bad day." I stepped aside, letting her in. We sat at my kitchen table, the silence stretched between us like an old scar. I watched her break a piece of the lemon bar with her fingers, not eating it, just fidgeting. "Mom," she said, finally looking at me. I was wrong. I didn't say anything. I thought Dad just needed a second chance at happiness. He made it sound like you were cold, like you didn't care anymore. And Celeste, she was so convincing. I really believed her. And now? She's a nightmare, Lily said, laughing bitterly. She treats Maya like a burden. Yells at Ethan. She lied about everything, her illness, her debt, even her past. She wasn't some lost love. She was just good at pretending. I nodded slowly. That's what she does. I'm not here to make excuses, she added quickly. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I studied her face. The same face I used to kiss goodnight, the same one I'd stood beside at her wedding, the same one that had smiled beside Frank at a wedding I was never invited to. I saw the guilt now, the cracks. You hurt me, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You stood there and clapped when your father married someone else. You posted photos, told the world that true love had won, as if I was the villain. I know, she whispered. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. We sat in silence again. This time it wasn't as sharp. I don't hate you, Lily, I finally said. But I've built something for myself now. A life where I wake up and don't feel small. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Can I visit sometimes? Not to fix anything, just to be your daughter again. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. One step at a time. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet for a long while. I looked around at my small apartment, at the books on my shelves, the photos from Iceland and Morocco, the vase of fresh tulips Martin had brought over just 2 days earlier. This space, this peace, it was mine. And though part of my past had walked back through the door, I wasn't afraid. I had learned something in these past months. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And moving on doesn't mean erasing what happened. It just means choosing yourself every single day, and refusing to let anyone take that choice away again. A few weeks passed after Lily's visit. She didn't push, didn't show up unannounced or flood my inbox with apologies. True to her word, She gave me space and quietly began building a bridge back to me, one message, one soft gesture at a time. Maya came by a few times too, usually after school, sometimes with her sketchbook in hand. We sat together in silence while she drew. I made her tea or cut fruit, and we talked in small ways. Nothing dramatic, just moments. But those moments meant more to me than all the years I spent screaming silently in a house that never listened. One afternoon, while Maya was sketching a flower from my balcony garden, she suddenly asked, "Grandma, did you ever love Grandpa? Like really love him?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes," I said after a pause. "I did. I loved him enough to wait patiently for promises he never kept. I loved him enough to raise a family and forgive the loneliness he left behind. I loved him until there was nothing left of me." She looked down, her pencil paused over the page. "Do you think he ever loved you the same way?" I smiled sadly. "Not in the way I needed. Maybe in the way he could." It wasn't until later that week that the final storm came. I should have known something was coming. There had been a strange silence from Frank's side. Celeste had gone quiet too. No more public rants or passive-aggressive blog comments. I was foolish to think the quiet meant peace. It was a Thursday evening. Martin and I were having dinner at a cozy bistro near the harbor. The candles flickered, and his eyes sparkled when he laughed at my impression of a cranky airport customs agent from our Portugal trip. Just as dessert arrived, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, saw Maya's name, and immediately felt a flutter of unease. "Grandma," she said, her voice trembling. "Can you come to the hospital? It's Grandpa." I was already standing before she finished the sentence. Martin paid the check without question, and we drove straight there. My heart pounded the entire ride, not from fear but from something deeper, an ache I thought I'd buried. When we arrived, Maya ran into my arms. Her face was red, her eyes swollen. Lily was pacing in the waiting area, and Ethan stood quietly in a corner, hands jammed into his pockets. The air was heavy with panic and regret. "What happened?" I asked. Maya sniffled. Celeste came back. Apparently, she had shown up at the house earlier that afternoon, her hair disheveled, dragging a suitcase behind her. She was shouting from the front porch, demanding to be let in, threatening Frank with some legal nonsense. According to Maya, Frank had refused, told her it was over, that he wanted nothing more to do with her. She screamed, Maya said, trembling. Said she gave up everything for him and he owed her. Then she pushed the door open and stormed inside. They were arguing loud. I stayed upstairs, but then I heard a crash. When I ran down, Grandpa was on the floor. He hit his head, he wasn't moving. She began to cry again. Lily put a hand on her shoulder, whispering something, but Maya clung to me. The doctor came out a few minutes later. Frank had suffered a severe concussion and possible brain bleeding. He was stable for now, but unconscious. "He keeps asking for someone named Evelyn," the doctor said. Lily looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "He means you." I hesitated. My stomach twisted. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see him. I wasn't sure if I could. Martin touched my elbow gently. "Go," he said. "Only if you need closure." So I did. I walked into that cold, sterile room, the beeping machines reminding me of hospital visits long ago. When Lily had her tonsils out, when Maya broke her arm in 3rd grade, when I was the one always holding hands, always waiting. Frank looked smaller than I remembered. Weaker. His eyes fluttered open when I stepped in. "Evelyn," he said, breathless. I said nothing at first. Just stood at the edge of the bed. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he whispered. "I was stupid. I thought I wanted something new, something different." "You got it," I said quietly. He winced, not from pain but from truth. "Celeste was a fantasy. You were everything else. The real thing." And I let it go. I nodded. "Yes. You did. Can you forgive me?" I looked down at his pale face, the same face I once kissed goodnight for years. I felt no hatred. No burning anger. Just a kind of quiet release. "No," I said gently. "But I don't hate you either." He closed his eyes. A tear slid down his cheek. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know." I turned to leave. I didn't need more words. Outside, Martin was waiting with a cup of tea. Maya was curled up on a chair, asleep on Lily's shoulder. For a moment, everything stood still. The next day, Celeste was gone again. No one knew where. Rumors swirled. Some said she fled town. Others claimed she was spotted boarding a bus out of state. It didn't matter. The damage was already done. Frank was released a week later, fragile but recovering. He went to stay at a rehabilitation center for a while. Lily offered to visit him regularly. I didn't. Instead, I took Martin's hand and boarded a plane to Switzerland. It was our first trip together, just the two of us. We stayed in a small village with flower-covered balconies and snow-capped peaks in the distance. We rode cable cars and drank mulled wine by fireplaces. And one evening, while sitting on a bench overlooking Lake Lucerne, Martin asked me something. "Are you happy?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. More than I ever thought possible. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding anyone else up. I wasn't waiting to be chosen or forgiven or needed. I was just living. And that, I had learned, was enough. It's strange how quickly the world forgets its villains when they're no longer entertaining. After the hospital incident, Celeste disappeared, and with her went the whispers, the online jabs, the judgmental stares. People moved on. The gossip dried up. And for the first time in nearly a year, I could walk through my old neighborhood without anyone turning away or pretending not to see me. Not that I needed their approval anymore. I had let go of that weight long ago. Martin and I returned from Switzerland with windburned cheeks, full hearts, and matching scarves from a tiny market stall in Lucerne. He made me laugh the way no one had in years. Real, belly-deep laughter, the kind that left your ribs sore. Sometimes we danced in my living room to old records, the curtains drawn, the world shut out. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't need me to be anything but who I was. That, in itself, was a kind of miracle. Maya visited often now. She helped me start a small garden on my balcony, mostly herbs and a few flowers that didn't mind the Seattle rain. We baked on Sundays just like old times, and she confided in me again. About school, about friendships, even about the way her mom and dad still tiptoed around each other in the house. "She doesn't trust him anymore," Maya said one afternoon, sifting flour into a bowl. "Not really. Not after letting Celeste into our lives like that. Trust is fragile," I told her. "And hard to earn back." She nodded. "Like a broken plate. Even if you glue it, you still see the cracks." Out of the mouths of teenagers. Lily, too, had started to come around more. She didn't try to explain herself anymore, and I didn't demand that she did. We had both accepted that there were parts of the past we couldn't repair, only acknowledge. She helped me with errands sometimes, even brought over old photo albums she had taken when I left the house, worried I might want them someday. "I didn't throw them out," she said one afternoon, placing the dusty box on my kitchen table. "Even when I was angry. I knew I'd regret it." We sat together flipping through the pages, birthdays, holidays, faded smiles from a younger version of myself who didn't know yet what she'd endure. There were even pictures of Frank and me. At first, I expected the bitterness to rise again. But it didn't. I just saw two people who tried and failed and carried on anyway. It was a quiet kind of forgiveness. Not for him, but for myself. Then, something unexpected happened. One Saturday morning, while Martin and I were out walking near Green Lake, I noticed a small crowd gathered near the park's outdoor theater stage. Curious, we wandered closer. A young woman with a clipboard was handing out flyers for an upcoming community event. Martin chatted with her for a moment, and I glanced at the flyer. It was a storytelling showcase. Open mic, ordinary people, extraordinary stories. Something about it tugged at me. "Evelyn," Martin said, reading over my shoulder, "you should do this." I laughed. "Me? Stand on a stage and talk about my life? Why not?" he said. "It's one hell of a story." I didn't answer right away, but the idea planted itself somewhere in my mind, stubborn and growing. A week later, I signed up. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Maya or Lily. I didn't know what I'd say, or if I'd freeze on stage, or if anyone would even care. But the night of the event, I dressed simply. A blue sweater. Comfortable shoes. I brought no notes. The theater was small, maybe 50 seats. The lights were soft. The air was buzzing with quiet energy. People shared stories about growing up, about loss, about second chances. And then it was my turn. I stepped onto the stage. My palms were sweaty, my heart pounding. But when I opened my mouth, the words flowed like I had been waiting my whole life to say them. I spent 45 years married to a man who didn't love me the way I needed to be loved. I began. And for most of that time, I convinced myself it was enough. I told them everything. Not every detail, but the truth that mattered. The betrayal, the quiet loneliness, the moment I packed my bags and finally chose myself. I told them about the lies, the judgment, the day I stood at the edge of a glacier and remembered I was still alive. And then I said something I hadn't planned. I used to think revenge was about getting even, proving a point, but I was wrong. The best revenge is choosing joy after someone tried to take it from you. It's rebuilding your life without bitterness. It's loving yourself so fiercely that no one can ever make you feel small again. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat. And then came the applause. Soft at first, then louder. I didn't expect it to mean so much. But it did. Afterward, people came up to me. Some hugged me. Others whispered that they had lived through something similar. One woman said, "Thank you. You gave me the courage to leave." I held her hand and said, "Then go. And don't look back." A few days later, Lily called me. "Maya told me about the storytelling night," she said. "She said you were amazing. She was there. She didn't tell you?" Lily laughed. "She snuck in with a few friends. She didn't want to make you nervous." That night, Maya messaged me a photo someone had taken of me on stage, mid-sentence, my hand raised like I was reaching for something I could finally grasp. "You looked powerful," she wrote. "Like a warrior." Tears welled in my eyes. A few weeks passed. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. Martin and I planned a trip to New Zealand. The garden bloomed. Lily started therapy. Maya painted a portrait of me and gifted it for my birthday. It wasn't perfect, but it was us sitting on the balcony surrounded by flowers, sunlight, and peace. Then out of nowhere, Ethan called. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. His voice was tense. "I just thought you should know. Celeste's been arrested." I blinked. "For what?" "Fraud. And identity theft. Turns out she used your name, your old ID, from some papers she found at the house, to apply for a line of credit." I felt the air leave my lungs. "She stole from me?" I said slowly. "Yes. But the bank caught it early. They flagged it before it went through. They said you're not liable, don't worry." "I'm not worried," I said. And I wasn't. I hung up and stared out the window for a long while. That woman had stolen my peace, my family, my name. But not anymore. And as I watched the wind move through the trees outside, I smiled. Because no matter what Celeste had tried to take, she could never steal what I'd finally found. Myself. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be standing in a vineyard in Tuscany, raising a glass of red wine with friends who had become more like sisters, I wouldn't have believed them. Back then, I was the woman left behind, forgotten, written off as bitter and outdated. Now I was Evelyn Carter, the woman who walked away, who reclaimed her name, who rebuilt a life from ashes and silence. We had planned this trip for months. The Golden Circle, as we jokingly called ourselves, June, Ruth, Amelia, Nora, and me. Women who had each lost something, or someone, or themselves, and decided not to stay lost. We'd already traveled together before: Japan, Morocco, Iceland, Portugal. But this trip felt like something different. A celebration. We stayed in a rustic villa just outside of Florence, surrounded by olive trees and golden hills. Every morning, we drank espresso on the terrace, and every evening, we watched the sun dip behind the vineyards, painting the sky with the kind of beauty that didn't ask for permission. Life here moved slower, kinder. And for once, I wasn't in a rush to prove anything. Martin came along too. He fit in with us seamlessly, making pasta with Ruth, carrying June's camera bag, dancing with me in the courtyard under fairy lights strung between old stone walls. He never tried to steal my light. He just stood beside me, quietly proud. That was the kind of love I never knew I could have. Gentle, steady, free. One evening, after a wine tasting, we all sat around a fire pit. The laughter had faded to soft murmurs, and I found myself staring into the flames. Ruth nudged me. "You're thinking about them again, aren't you?" I didn't pretend not to know who she meant. Sometimes I still wonder if they ever really saw me. Frank, Lily, even Maya for a while. "They do now," she said. "And if they don't, that's their loss." I nodded. She was right. When we returned to Seattle, fall had arrived. The air was crisp, the leaves golden and red, dancing along the sidewalks. My apartment felt warmer, somehow fuller. Not with things, but with meaning. Photographs from my travels lined the shelves. A sketch of me and Martin, drawn by Maya, hung in the entryway. A dried flower from that Tuscan vineyard sat in a glass jar on the table. Life didn't feel like something I was surviving anymore. It felt like something I was living. One afternoon, as I was organizing some of my old travel photos, Maya came by after school. She looked older somehow, more thoughtful. The kind of girl who had already seen too much, but was determined not to carry it all forever. She helped me rearrange the frames, pausing at one of the glacier in Iceland. "Was this when you started to let go?" she asked. I smiled. That was when I realized I could. She nodded, then looked at me seriously. "Grandma, I've been thinking about telling my own story. For school. They asked us to write about someone who changed our perspective. I want to write about you." The words hit harder than she could have known. I reached for her hand. You can write whatever you want, sweetheart. Just make sure you tell the truth. I will. We sat in comfortable silence after that. No tension. No pretending. Just two women, two generations, finally seeing each other clearly. Then one day, not long after that, Lily called. I'm selling the house, she said, her voice quiet. The old house. Yes. It's too big. Too full of memories we don't know what to do with. I waited. I thought maybe you'd want to come by. One last time. Part of me didn't want to. What good could come from walking through rooms that once made me feel invisible? But another part of me knew that closure wasn't something that waited for the perfect moment. You had to take it when it came. So I said yes. The house was quiet when I arrived. The furniture was gone, the walls bare, the air filled with echoes. I walked through slowly, each step a conversation with my past. The kitchen, where I used to cook alone while Frank sat in the study. The hallway, where Maya once ran to me after scraping her knee. The living room, where I sat on the couch the night Frank came home with lipstick on his collar. Lily was waiting by the back door. She looked tired but lighter. Everything's boxed, she said. We're almost done. I don't need anything, I said. I kept a few things, she added. Photos. Recipes. Some of your old letters. We stood together in the backyard. The garden was overgrown, the grass patchy. But the tree in the corner, the one I planted when Maya was born, still stood tall. She used to climb that tree, I said, smiling. Lily nodded. She still would if I let her. We didn't say goodbye. We just parted ways, knowing there was nothing left to say in that house. It had been a chapter. A long, difficult chapter. But not the end. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From Frank. He was living in an assisted living facility now. Alone. He wrote that he'd seen the article about my storytelling night. That he'd watched a clip someone posted online. That he cried. He didn't ask to see me. He didn't beg for forgiveness again. He just wrote, I was wrong. And I hope that in whatever comes next, you find only peace. I folded the letter and placed it in a box with the rest of them. I didn't reply. Some things are better left in the past. Today, I wake up without dread. I make tea without listening for footsteps I used to tiptoe around. I wear what I want. I dance when music plays. I write. I garden. I travel. And sometimes when the wind carries the scent of rain through my open window, I remember who I used to be. And who I am now. Martin and I are planning another trip, this time to Argentina. He jokes that we'll learn to tango, though we both know we'll end up stepping on each other's toes and laughing the whole way through. Maya got accepted into a college she loves. She wants to study art and psychology. To understand people, she told me. To help them heal. Lily's seeing someone new. Slowly. Carefully. She says she finally knows what love shouldn't feel like. That's enough for now. As for me, I'm not waiting anymore. Not for apologies. Not for permission. Not for time to pass before I start living. I already am. Because in the end, the greatest revenge was never watching them fall apart. It was becoming whole. I lived through betrayal. Through loneliness. Through the sting of being forgotten by the very people I gave everything to. But I found myself. And that, more than anything, is the ending I would choose again and again.